All right, here we go. Merry Christmas and Happy New Year. I hope everyone's having a wonderful vacation. I want to explain to you what we are going to be doing on this show for the next 2 weeks, Christmas week and the week of New Year's. For the next 2 weeks, we will be playing for you the most viewed episodes from the Liz Wheeler Show for 2025 and the most impactful episodes, the episodes that either made the biggest difference or that garnered the most media attention. And we are starting that today. So without further ado, if you would subscribe to the show before we get started, I would greatly appreciate that. You can go to youtube.com/Liz Wheeler, x.com/Liz_Wheeler, or we have video on Spotify now. You can find the censorship-free version of the show on Spotify just by searching The Liz Wheeler Show and hitting subscribe. Thank you to everyone who has been doing that. And without further ado, here is the best of The Liz Wheeler Show from 2025. All right, we are live right here on X, on YouTube, on Facebook, on Rumble. It is good to see you all. Thank you for joining me today. This is The Liz Wheeler Show, and I am your host, Liz Wheeler. Before we get started, would you mind subscribing on Spotify? We have video over there now. They are a censorship-free platform, so everything that you could ask for, you can find on Spotify. Just pick up your phone, click on that Spotify app, search The Liz Wheeler Show, and hit subscribe. And if you could, leave us a 5-star review while you're on the page. I would greatly appreciate it. It helps other people find the show. And subscriptions have been growing by the day over there, so I know you guys are hearing this and taking action, which is what I love about you, so thank you for doing that. My question today, to start the show, this is a legitimate question that has been in my mind. I've been ruminating about this for the past couple of months. Did you ever wonder where AOC and Ilhan Omar and Rashida Tlaib and Cori Bush, the 4 squad members, and now Zohran Mamdani as well, did you ever wonder where these people, these young radical leftists came from? Like, how did they rise to such prominence in politics so quickly? It's not like they spent decades working their way through the hierarchy of their party. They just came out of nowhere, won elections, had enormous fundraising apparatuses, and they just seemed to come out of thin air. And I've been wondering, who orchestrated their ascent to power? It just doesn't make sense that this would be grassroots, that they're just so good at fundraising. They're just so charismatic. They're just so able to connect with the voter that this could be some kind of organic thing. So who is behind them? Where did they come from? Well, the answer to that is not only what we're going to talk about on the show today. The answer to that lies in one connective factor that all of these radical politicos share, and that is membership in the Democrat Socialists of America, the DSA. Now, the DSA, you've heard of it. I've heard of it. This is not something new. The DSA is not a branch of the Democrat Party, though, as we're kind of led to believe that it is. It's not just a different sect or a denomination, but still Democrats, still a true believer in the Democrat Party platform. No. Actually, if you pull back the curtain on the DSA and you listen to high-ranking members of the DSA plot and strategize, you realize that the DSA and their members view politics not as the civil participation that you and I might consider politics to be, not as service to our country, but rather they view politics as a weapon to overthrow our country and Western civilization as a whole. And this is not my inference. This is not my speculation. This is not my opinion. This is the words of members of the DSA themselves. Here they are admitting their plot in their own words. Take a look.
It's no secret that the Democratic Socialists of America hate the Democratic Party.
I think we're all on the same page that we hate the Democratic Party.
The Democratic Party is not really our friend. It isn't.
So why are the DSA such major players in the Democratic Party? This odd relationship can be understood with the cuckoo analogy. In nature, the cuckoo survives by trickery. It lays its egg in another bird's nest. The unsuspecting parents raise the imposter as their own until the cuckoo grows strong enough to push the true chicks out. The DSA is the cuckoo inside the Democratic Party.
DSA is not the Democratic Party.
We must separate ourselves from the toxic Democratic Party
we can put forward a clear, aggressive, principled strategy that pushes back against the Democratic leadership and the Democratic Party as a whole.
DSA candidates run as Democrats in safe blue districts. They slip through low turnout primaries. And once inside, they use the Democratic label as camouflage while advancing an extremist anti-American agenda far beyond the party's mainstream.
I don't agree with the Democratic Party, but it's a great tool.
The Democratic is a tool that we use.
Once in office, DSA candidates take orders from DSA's internal enforcers and working groups. City halls and state houses start running as socialist machines controlled by the organization, not the Democratic Party, and certainly not voters.
They have to have a connection with DSA's internal politics, and they have to be committed to the eventual goal of building a separate entity from the Democrats.
DSA are revolutionaries, and the Democrats are their first victims. And in city after city, DSA victories prove their plan works.
I think that the model that we used in New York is 100% replicatable.
And just like the cuckoo, once the DSA grows strong, it pushes the true Democrats out, hollowing the party from within,
building towards political independence and tearing apart the Democratic Party.
The DSA is not here to strengthen the Democratic Party. It is here to consume it.
We're not here to make the Democrats a little bit better. We're here to actually enact socialism. And socialism is not just better capitalism. It's overthrowing the entire capitalist state.
It's our duty, DSA, to cultivate this power.
The cuckoo is in the nest, and New York City is poised to elect not a Democrat, but Zohran Mamdani, an extremist within the DSA.
We understand that winning an election is not an end. It is a means to an end.
The most important thing that we can do is take that empire down from within.
Ultimately to overthrow our own empire.
We need a movement that can drive a snake to the heart of the empire.
We need to orient ourselves towards insurrection.
Ultimately, they said to overthrow our own empire. Like a cuckoo in a bird's nest. To infiltrate the Democrat Party from within in order to topple it. Suddenly, when you hear Zohran Mamdani's weird statements, doesn't it suddenly seem like you hear them in a whole new light? I mean, think about the video that we watched together on yesterday's episode where Zohran Mamdani, with his face in a mask by a kerchief, says that we came to politics to remake the states in the image of our people. Take a look at that.
We came here to remake this state in the image of our people.
In the image of our people? Who, Zohran, are your people? Are you talking about Muslims? Because this doesn't sound like a promise of someone who wants to uphold American values. Suddenly you hear these statements in a whole new light when you realize that Zohran Mamdani is part of the DSA. The DSA whose goal is to use politics as a tool to overthrow the American empire. Now, Zohran Mamdani's odds in the New York City mayoral election are currently plummeting primarily based on the lie he told about his aunt, supposedly after 9/11, experiencing such Islamophobia that she couldn't wear her hijab on the subway. Well, it was a lie. It wasn't true. His aunt didn't even live in the United States. She lived in Tanzania from the year 2000 to 2003. He made this up. The real victims, he wants you to think, of 9/11 are the Muslims who faced discrimination, without ever mentioning the 3,000 people who were killed by radical jihadists when they hijacked jetliners into the World Trade Centers. And his odds are plummeting. There's days left until Election Day. But a new scandal could threaten not just Zohran Mamdani's campaign, but his very residence in the United States. Remember, Zohran Mamdani was not born in the United States. He was born in Uganda. He wasn't even a citizen of our great nation until 2018. He was naturalized as a citizen in that year. But new information has been given to the Department of Justice by a member of the United States Congress referring Mamdani for investigation for potential immigration fraud. I'm going to read you what Congressman Andy Ogles wrote. He posted on X and said, "I have just sent a letter to Attorney General Pam Bondi urging her to investigate Zohran Mamdani's naturalization documents. Mamdani could very well be made mayor of New York City in less than 2 weeks. We have no time to waste. In 2017, he was a public supporter of the totalitarian DSA, praised terrorists, and openly despised the U.S. Constitution. Those views must be disclosed during naturalization, and if they were withheld, that is a federal crime. If we deport Mamdani for breaking real laws, we can save New York, the congressman writes, and take back our country from the Marxists who want to reduce America to a third world wasteland. Now, the response to Congressman Ogles' DOJ letter has been people saying, well, this is a big if, sir. Do you have any evidence that Zohran Mamdani hid his radical praise of terrorists from the naturalization authorities before he was granted citizenship? And today we present to you a report that proves, in fact, Mamdani did vocalize such heinous views praising terrorists and murderers. You remember when he first came onto the scene, Zohran Mamdani was thought he was so cute, he was so charismatic because he was a former rapper. He wrote his own rap lyrics. Well, my next guest analyzed the rap lyrics of Zohran Mamdani's songs and found embedded within these rap songs, open praise for grisly murderers. I'm going to show you that video in just a moment, but first I want to thank today's sponsor, All Family Pharmacy. Listen, All Family Pharmacy might be a resource that I need today, let's be real. Most big chain pharmacies don't care about your medical freedom. They just want you to get in line, take their shot, and move on. The experience is horrible. All I want when I need a medication is to be able to get it. It's that simple. You know, when I'm sick, I'm even a little less patient than usual. That's why I'm proud to partner with All Family Pharmacy. That's how they work. All Family Pharmacy does things differently than the big med pharmacies. They believe that your health decisions should stay between you and your doctor, not dictated by some government agency or insurance company. Check this out. This is how they work. You pull up their website, allfamilypharmacy.com/Liz, and you search for your medication. You'll find it because they have over 200 options. Once you find it, you select it, you place your order. A doctor then reviews your order, writes you a prescription, and it's shipped straight to your door. That's it. That's all there is to it. The gatekeeping that has overtaken our healthcare system is outrageous. No, it shouldn't be Dr. Fauci or Albert Bourla or the American Medical Association or your insurance company who decides what medication works for you and whether or not you should get access to it. You should decide. That's what medical freedom means. And that's why All Family Pharmacy exists, to serve your needs. You can visit them at allfamilypharmacy.com/Liz. If you use my code Liz10, you can get 10% off. All Family Pharmacy makes it simple, fast, reliable to get the medications your family needs. That's allfamilypharmacy.com/Liz, promo code Liz10. All right, so I first want to introduce you to the guest today. You guys loved him when he was on the show a couple weeks ago, so we wanted to invite him back. He's been producing phenomenal journalism lately, so you should be following him regardless. It's Ashley Rindsberg, the editor at NeutralPOV. That would be Neutral Point of View. Ashley, good to see you again. Thanks for coming back.
Thank you, Liz. Great to see you.
Okay, so you wrote a fantastic deep dive into Zohran Mamdani's background, which I think is the substantiating evidence to Congressman Ogles' letter to Attorney General Pam Bondi saying, hey, did Zohran Mamdani commit immigration fraud here? Did he disclose his, not just his sympathy, but his outright praise for terrorists before he received naturalized citizenship? So tell me a little bit about this journey. We do have the video, so when you've introed it, you've set it up here, we'll show the video of his rap lyrics here.
The New York Post had this really great story in June, right when this election was starting to heat up. And what they reported was that Mamdani had produced a rap in 2017. In this rap, he is singing about his love for the Holy Land Five. And the Holy Land Five, it refers to a group of Hamas-linked operatives who were criminally convicted in the United States in a federal court for financing Hamas terrorism. This really got buried. It got sort of swept under the rug because the Rolling Stone, NBC, the rest of the mainstream media just got really breathless and excited about Mamdani, the young rapper. They completely ignored the real fact of the story, which is that the front runner for the mayor of New York City was on record proudly praising a terror-linked finance operation that had been convicted in a court. The other thing that people didn't pick up on at the time is that there wasn't just one case, there were two trials. The second trial was a civil trial, and that trial found that these same people that Mamdani was pledging his love to were held liable in a federal court for the murder of a boy from New York City. This is the frontrunner for the mayor of New York City, praising publicly in a rap men who were found liable for the murder of a boy from that same city.
Which is, I mean, it's so despicable. It's so despicable. And I do want to play this video because I don't want anyone to think that I'm exaggerating his praise, that it's just a passing reference that I misinterpreted because I'm on opposite ends of the political spectrum as he is. Listen to these words for yourself. Watch Zohran Mamdani praise these terrorists. Take a look.
In 2017, Zohran Mamdani released a rap track that praised 5 convicted Hamas funders known as the Holy Land Five. Now he wants to run New York.
My love to the Holy Land Five, he says, you better look them up. My love to the Holy Land Five, you better look them up. Ashley, clearly I oppose Zohran Mamdani's politics, right? Clearly I do. I do not think there is any other way to interpret that line than it's obviously praising them.
It's doing a lot more than praising him. That's the scary part. And this is the thing that if the media had done its job even remotely and investigated this, rather than starting to publish all these articles about his rap going viral, what they would have asked themselves is what 25-year-old rapper sings about a criminally convicted 501c3, its chairman, its president, its New Jersey representative, and its chief fundraiser. Nobody does that. It's not normal. Rappers rap about Cristal champagne, about cars, about their lives. These are things that we know, we like them, we enjoy these types of raps. It's great. Nobody raps about this kind of thing unless you are embedded in the very same network of propaganda and Hamas support, ideological support that he is actually a part of. And that this is the reason why he made that, why he sang that lyric, why he wrote that lyric, is because it itself was a reaction to the conviction. Once this conviction took place in the early 2000s and the civil case took place in the early 2000s, the network that's responsible for this, and this is Hamas itself, this is not Hamas adjacent, these are Hamas leaders, decided that they would turn this defeat into a propaganda win. And they did that by making this into a human rights issue, as if these men were wrongfully convicted, which they were not. Their appeal was denied. The Supreme Court declined to look at the case because everything was buttoned up perfectly by the FBI and the DOJ in this case. Nevertheless, they saw an opportunity to turn this into a piece of propaganda. This became what Laura Burns, who is the lead FBI investigator on the Holy Land Five case, called a platform. It's kind of a propaganda plank to say these men were wrongfully convicted. With Zohran Mamdani rapping about this, he is contributing directly to that propaganda campaign and likely did it knowingly, because it's not just about Zohran, it's also about his father. So one of the core members of this group is Hatem Bazian. He is inextricably linked up with all of these organizations involved in the Holy Land Five case. And Bazian is also the founder of Students for Justice in Palestine. When he staged his first national convention, I think it was in 2013 or so, or 2011, sorry, his first keynote speaker was Mahmoud Mamdani, which is Zohran's father.
Yeah, so let's walk through this, because I know this is one of those tangled webs that we often talk about in the show, and I want to make sure that it's perfectly clear. So the Holy Land Five, this is not just an organization. These are 5 individuals who were part of this group, and they were, as individuals, convicted and sentenced to prison. So, for example, the Holy Land Foundation president was Shakuri Abu Bekar, and the chairman, Gassam Alashi, they were each sentenced to 65 years each. right? An additional member was sentenced to 20 years. 2 other members each received 15 years. So those were criminal convictions for violating U.S. law, funding terrorist groups overseas. They are serving prison time. Separately, and this is actually before the criminal convictions, back in 2004, it's the case you mentioned, they were found liable in a civil trial because for the 1996 Hamas murder of this New York City, this young boy from New York City who was murdered outside of Jerusalem by Hamas. Now, this is where, again, it's kind of a tangled web, but you cannot make this up. It's always connected. If you are willing to follow these lines, it's always connected. So the boy from New York City who was murdered by Hamas, his parents sued the Holy Land Five under the U.S. Anti-Terrorism Act, and they sued 3 organizations, right? The Holy Land Foundation and 2 others. One of the other groups that was sued was one called the Islamic Association of Palestine. Now, during this lawsuit, after they were found liable for the murder of this young boy, the Islamic Association of Palestine dissolved, right? Because they had this huge financial judgment against them. But what they actually did is they didn't dissolve. They just rebranded themselves. They called themselves American Muslims for Palestine, and they kind of resurrected. It's the same people. It's the same money. They're just trying to avoid having to pay the judgment against them. That's where we get to this individual, Hatem Baziam. So American Muslims for Palestine, this resurrected version of a group that was found liable for the murder of a New York City boy. This resurrected group was started by Hatem Bazian. And this is where I just think, my goodness, when you ask where people like Zohran Mamdani come from, what are their true views? Are they just entitled and out of touch and they've been indoctrinated in universities, or are they true believers in the destruction of Western civilization through communism and jihadism? When you follow this trail, Ashley, I have to conclude the latter is true, because we've talked a lot also on this show in the last 3 months about Students for Justice in Palestine, because Roy Singham, it's his money that funds that group. He's paying for the violence that Students for Justice in Palestine riots put on at colleges and universities. It's all connected. Roy Singham's sister, of course, donated directly to Zohran Mamdani's mayoral campaign. But this individual, Bazian, as you said, founded Students for Justice in Palestine. And at their first national conference, the keynote speaker was Zohran Mamdani's father, Mahmoud Mamdani. It's unreal.
That's right. And everything you said is accurate. The AMP, American Muslims for Palestine, is being accused by the parents of the boy who was murdered of basically standing up a new alter ego organization, a front for the organization that was criminally convicted in the Holy Land Foundation trial. And that case is proceeding quickly. A judge in 2022 ruled that it can go forward. They've completed discovery. That is rapidly going forward. The AMP is also now strongly resisting attempts by Congress to have them reveal their funding sources, which they refuse to do. They are now in contempt, I guess, of Congress, because they were ordered to do this by Congress. So there is a lot of these machinations. It's going back and forth. But I think when we zoom out, what we really need to remember is that this all goes back to 1993. And that was the year that Hamas leaders in the United States met in a hotel in Philadelphia to plan how they would infiltrate American institutions. They would infiltrate media, academia, politics, law, and basically every other facet of American life that they deemed important. What they did not know at that time was that the FBI was wiretapping that meeting. So it is all on record. But these organizations that we're talking about today, including the IAP, which is now being accused of being reconstituted as the AMP, and the Holy Land Foundation itself, were key pillars of the plan to infiltrate American institutions. That is where this all begins, and that's how we get to this.
As wiretapped in that Philadelphia hotel?
Yes, and including in documents that the FBI later seized, showing this is how they plan to build this out. And this was a key pillar of the case against Holy Land Foundation.
Again, can't make this stuff up. So
First of all, why were Hamas leaders plotting here in the United States? Because they had to observe our institutions to know how best to infiltrate them?
They wanted to infiltrate them in order to take them over, to capture them, because they understood that their plan for Islamification of Palestine could only go forward successfully if they were able to convince the most powerful nation in the world to go along with it to some degree, or at least to give them enough daylight to be able to prosecute this mission. At the time, the United States was squarely against this idea in almost every facet. Even in academia, these were not ideas that were acceptable. Today, when we look at the situation on campuses, when we look at the media, when we look at even in politics today, we're seeing someone like Zohran Mamdani rising to the top of the mayoral race in New York City, the most Jewish city in the entire world, population-wise. What we're seeing is that the Hamas planners have been drastically successful, far more successful than I think anyone could ever have imagined at the time. And that includes them having had this conviction in the Holy Land Foundation trial and the other civil case that they lost. It didn't matter. They were able to just drive through it. And this is part of the strategy that they employ. They don't think in the terms that we think in, which is maybe 2-year election cycles or 4-year election cycles or economic cycles. These people are thinking on a 100-year time cycle. And that's what enables them to just brush aside what we would see as major strategic setbacks. For them, they're able to turn them on their head and to turn them into victories that help propel them forward.
Which is, I mean, so that Philadelphia hotel room meeting of Hamas operatives when they were plotting how to infiltrate institutions, that was even 2 years after there was a memo, a 1991 memo written by Hamas leadership that essentially said part of their plot to subvert the United States was to create a decentralized network of, I mean, I would describe them a decentralized network of people like Zohran Mamdani, by ideological actors that would, and think about his rap. This even makes his rap make sense. Like, how do you get into the culture? How do you sort of hijack the way that people think about things, people's worldview? Well, you do that not necessarily through like a podium political speech. That's usually the culmination of a cultural moment. You hijack a culture and shape people's worldview through, I mean, we've always talked about this when it comes to Hollywood, right? You do this through the arts, through music and movies and things that people don't realize are actually inherently political because it changes the way people think.
That's right. And that's where the far left activism comes in so beautifully, is because the far left, having learned from the Soviets, understood how to do this better than anybody. And they still do it today really well. And this is where you can kind of see how the Islamist cause and the far left cause meld into one thing. And the Palestinian cause as well has elements of far leftism, Soviet style propaganda that is not Islamist, like the PFLP is a great example of that. And they're very skilled at making these heroic archetypes, these figures that get into the culture that we're seeing today, being held up by young people in America. These are convicted terrorists, held up as heroes of our culture, which is astonishing. But this melding between Islamist ambitions of conquest and the far left's ability to seep into the culture and to sort of leach into our cultural groundwater is what makes this movement so effective and so hard to stop, because what they're doing is they're hijacking not just the democratic openness and liberalism that is afforded to them in the United States, but also the culture that is part of that liberalism.
Yeah, I think so. So circling back then to this congressional referral to the DOJ over possible immigration fraud, what do you make of this? I mean, the standard would need to be that Zohran Mamdani did not disclose this type of praise, probably this praise specifically. That's just one of the reasons we showed it on the show today, praising the Holy Land Five, saying you better look them up. If he didn't disclose that, that could constitute fraud and he could be denaturalized and deported, correct?
I think that makes a lot of sense, especially when we have something like him rapping and pledging his love for the Holy Land Five, which were criminally convicted. It's not just saying there is some cause out there. I can say I'm a jihadist and I like jihad, which is iffy. It's not great to say that, but it's not the same thing as pledging your love to a criminally convicted organization that is linked to terror. That is a whole different bar to reach, and Mamdani has actually reached it.
Yeah, and before he received naturalized citizenship. So, my opinion, the Attorney General absolutely should look into this for the good of our nation. When we have a law in the book, if we don't enforce that law, if we have immigration laws and there are standards for receiving naturalized citizenship and those are broken, if we do not hold the people who broke them accountable, what's the purpose of having those laws on the books in the first place?
Yeah, that's right. And I think there's probably a lot more to the story of foreign influence in the campaign. It's a story I'm working on right now, which is that Zohran Mamdani was able to secure this nomination for the Democratic Party because he was able to mobilize so many voters in New York City from the subcontinent, most of them Muslims. This was orchestrated on his behalf by an organization called Drum. And a lot of the people involved in this organization are similarly facing serious allegations that they were not able to do this kind of work under the visas that they came to this country on. That includes their lead organizer, who admittedly came to the United States, in her words, as an undocumented immigrant. She was an illegal immigrant to the United States. That's how she got here. And there's possibly visa violations there as well. So this is not just a one-off. This is sort of a feature, not a bug for these networks. They're able to infiltrate, they're able to come to the United States, and again, to abuse the liberalism, to abuse asylum laws and refugee seeking that they're granted, which I don't think bothers them. I think this is for them, just a strategic opportunity that they are very good at exploiting. And if that's the case with Mamdani, which we'll see what happens, absolutely that should be actioned in some regard.
Yeah, and I think that's important to note that this is not a one-off or an isolated incident or one technicality. This is an attempted foreign takeover of the United States. That's what it is. These are people who hate America, who openly admit that they want to topple the American empire. They don't like capitalism. They don't like freedom. They want communism. They want jihadism. They're not even supposed to be here. If they're illegal aliens, it seems that Mamdani, at least allegedly, and it seems pretty realistic to me, may have obtained naturalized citizenship under false pretenses. He definitely doesn't like the country to which he now belongs. I doubt he would identify as such. I mean, that video we showed earlier, he wants to remake the state in the image of his people. There's really no other way to interpret that except to interpret it as he wants to remake New York City in the image of the Islamic religion. And by the way, I mean, we talk about this orchestrated effort of these jihadists, of Hamas, going all the way back to 1991, their memo, 1993, that meeting in Philadelphia in the hotel that was wiretapped, these organizations like the Holy Land Foundation and the Holy Land Five. You talk about all of those, but even Mamdani himself, I mean, he was chosen, he was picked, he was selected for this position. And Steven Crowder's investigative team has a new video out that I want to show you, because this is a high-level campaign official in Mamdani's campaign saying that Mamdani's rise is not grassroots. It's been a coordinated effort since back to 2014. Take a look at this.
It's not like this just came out of nowhere. Not at all. This has been a coordinated, organizing effort for since 2014.
That's the citywide canvas director, Robert Akla, for the Zohran for New York City effort since 2014. That is 11 years ago. Ashley, this is not organic. It's not grassroots.
No, it's definitely not. And it couldn't be, to achieve the aims that they're seeking to achieve and to get the kind of wins that they have achieved in this. I mean, the broader Islamist socialist alliance that we're seeing make these kinds of inroads. You don't do this kind of thing on a lark. It's not something that's happenstance. It's something that's planned. And again, we go back to the 1993 thing. It was all there. It was all planned out. It's all financed. And part of why they're able to be so successful in Hamas's case is because they don't do anything else. They don't have to build hospitals. That's all done for them by the UN. They don't have to run schools. It's done for them by the UN. They don't have to raise revenue. It's all provided by Europe and by the United States. They are free to dedicate their entire energies to two causes. One is infiltrating the West, and the other one is destroying Israel. And when you are able to dedicate 100% of your resources, your activity, your energies on something like that, you are able to make really good progress, as we've seen. So none of this is by coincidence. I mean, again, we saw recent reporting about Mamdani being very close with the 1993 World Trade Center bomber or planner, one of the planners of the bombing of the World Trade Center, and is open about this. This is the interesting thing. He's open about it not because he slipped up, but because the boasting about it, the bragging about it, the normalization of it, turning what we understand to be terrorism into so-called resistance is the point. That is the plan. This is the destination itself. The propaganda is not just a means, but it's also an end.
Yeah. And it's still insane to me to sit here and realize that only 24 years after the worst terror attack on U.S. soil in New York City, the leading candidate for New York City mayor is openly praising terrorist murderers. Like, if you had told me this after 9/11, I think if you had made a comment and said, guess what, in 2025, New York City is about to elect a communist jihadist, everyone would have been like, did the terrorists win? The ones that attack us? Did we lose the war? Like, did they take over the United States? Did they establish an Islamic caliphate in the United States? Because otherwise, what possible explanation could you have for saying that in 2025, New York City is about to elect a communist jihadist? I mean, that's how I would have reacted if you told me that 24 years ago.
Yeah, it's definitely got Man in the High Castle vibes, and it's not because he's a Muslim. And I think this is where things get really twisted. It would be fantastic to see a Muslim or any other type of person as mayor of New York City who's espousing patriotic values, love of all people in the United States, not praising terror-linked organizations and criminally convicted terror supporting organizations. That would be great, but this is not what we're looking at right now with Mamdani. This is a completely different state of affairs. So we're in a place that, again, I think is a product of all this planning and a product of the strategy of Hamas's infiltration of the United States. And often when I think about 9/11, the events of that day, the physical attack, were not the main attack. Of course, they were horrendous, they were atrocious, they were terrible for the entire country, let alone for the victims. But the real attack came in the subsequent 24 years, where America first was blamed for it, saying it was our foreign policy that produced this response. Then we began to hear this narrative that we deserved it as a country. Then we began to hear narratives that we did it as a country, that it was George Bush or whoever else in the United States. And that, again, this is not just bubbling up from random corners of the internet. This is coordinated propaganda that is meant to shift public opinion against the United States, to strip the United States of its moral legitimacy, and to achieve the kinds of goals that the people in the DSA video that you just aired minutes ago are openly saying that they are seeking to achieve, which is the overthrow of the United States of America. This is actually what they want.
Yeah. And the first step is vilification of the United States. So I want to ask you too, what you think is going to happen in New York City should Zohran Mamdani win? Because I know his odds are plummeting. I mean, in a sense, I still think he's going to win. A couple of days, I don't think is enough time to make up for, what was he, 20 points ahead of Andrew Cuomo? And Andrew Cuomo is not exactly a well-loved figure in New York City. He lost the Democratic primary to Zohran. I mean, the whole race is the height of absurdity. But when you see Zohran and his orchestrated rise, you see his backing, you hear his ideology, you understand that he's praised and taken pictures with jihadists. And by the way, that radical imam that you mentioned, that's Siraj Wahhaj, who was an unindicted co-conspirator in the 1993 World Trade Center attacks. And Zohran not only met with him recently, but took a photo smiling with him. Who does that unless your views are in alignment with his views? I mean, you or I would not stand next to Siraj Wahhaj and smile and take a photograph. I wonder what you predict or envision will happen in New York City, especially when this is a particular topic that people care about on both sides of the aisle, right? Their safety and their well-being and their prosperity. Zohran Mamdani is not just ideologically crazy and, possessed or whatever, however you want to describe, propagator of the communist ideology, when it comes to crime in New York City, I mean, he said that prisons don't work, that prisons don't make us safer, that policing doesn't make us any safer. I think we have that video if we can show that.
The way that prisons are set up in our society, I would argue that they do not work. They do not make us safer. The instinct is to just take that person, the source of that harm, the source of that issue, and then just throw them away. Put them in a cage and throw away the key. And that doesn't address the reason why that harm was created in the first place. A lot of times, people who create trauma for others are those who themselves went through trauma earlier in their own lives.
Right.
And I bring all of this up to say that, you know, again, like when we talk about policing, I don't think the system actually makes us safer. I think what it does is it just removes problems out of view. It just...
So it doesn't make us safer. Prisons don't make us safer. So putting a murderer in prison doesn't make the city safer. Putting somebody who is a repeat offender in behind bars doesn't make people safer. The victims of these crimes aren't safer with the criminal incarcerated. I mean, it just doesn't make any sense. It's ideological. It's ideological, right? And Zohran, by the way, proves that point because there's another video, which I want to roll here in a second, in which he said, what purpose do prisons serve besides making people feel good? And I assume he's talking about the people putting criminals in prison as if that's something that politicians enjoy doing. Take a look.
Thank you. Are prisons obsolete?
Whew, coming through with the quotes, coming through with the titles of the books. I have to read that, actually. I haven't read that as yet. But I think that, frankly, I mean, what purpose do they serve?
Right.
Right? I think we have to ask ourselves that, which is that, you know, I think a lot of people who defend the carceral state, they defend the idea of it and the way it makes them feel.
It's wild.
What purpose do they serve? I don't know. The recidivism rate, and I looked this up before we came on the show, the recidivism rate ranges anywhere from, the recidivism rate, by the way, is the percentage of people who have been incarcerated, criminals who've been convicted and put behind bars, who after they've served their sentence go on to commit crimes again. The recidivism rate is anywhere between 39% and 83%, and it depends on whether you're talking about rearrest or reincarceration. So 83% is actually like the most consistent number of how often people who have been incarcerated once they're released get arrested again. 83% of the time. So what purpose do prisons serve? I don't know, to keep the murderer from murdering someone else, to keep the rapist from raping someone else, to keep the arsonist from, you know, setting fire to someone else's building, to keep society from suffering the ramifications of having their constitutionally protected rights violated and their bodily rights violated. I mean, how this is not just stupid. There are some politicians who say things and you're like, wow, you are just dumb as a rock. To me, Ashley, this is not dumb. What material impact is this going to have on New York City?
I think it's going to be a disaster for New Yorkers and people who visit that city. I think New York, from what I have heard from people I know who live there today, it's not in the best state. It's not in the best shape. It's already kind of on rocky territory. And if you bring someone like Mamdani in to lead that city and to do even a fraction of the things he's talking about doing, the city will crater. You will see even higher crime rates. You will see a worse subway system. And the subway system, let's be honest, is already insane. It's crazy. You will see more traffic, more of all the things that we don't want in our lives. And we run away from cities like New York for. That, I think, is what's going to happen. I think in a limited sense, that's not, let's say, a terrible thing, because finally people will be able to see what this kind of decision-making leads to and the kind of state of affairs that it brings about. However, I also think there's an element of that just doesn't quite matter today, because we have a lot of young people on social media, on TikTok, being radicalized by the messaging. The reality doesn't matter as much as the messaging. We're seeing that with Ilhan Omar. The reality just doesn't matter. It's the message that matters. And these people, as we've discussed, are really good at the messaging. And that's the problem, is that he becomes a symbol for the radicalization of another generation of young Americans. That's actually what really scares me. Even though the GOP can sort of hang this Mamdani around the neck of the Democratic Party, I actually don't think that's a good thing. Because what we really do want is a healthy Democratic Party, in addition, as an opposition party or as a party in leadership when it gets there. You don't want a deranged, addled, radical Democratic Party as opposed to the GOP and whatever it might become. You want a healthy party. But with people like Mamdani winning elections, that's not what we're going to get.
Yeah, and it's interesting actually that you bring up the messaging, because Mamdani himself is very aware of the concept that you're articulating. He actually said, and I want to show this video. This is the one about the New York Police Department being tied to the IDF. And you'll understand why I show this video in just a second here, but this is all about how he's messaging to speak, in a sense, to what people care about practically in their cities, but really his underlying motive, the reason he's highlighting whatever he's highlighting, is to thrust upon them, to indoctrinate them in his ideology, which is this vendetta against not just the United States and Israel, but Western civilization as a whole. Take a look at this.
I think in the first question, there is this setting up of a context where this idea of hyper-local and international. And I think that for anyone to care about these issues, we have to make them hyper-local. We have to make clear that when the boot of the NYPD is on your neck, it's been laced by the IDF. Right? We have to make, not specifically that example all the time, but just to say that for working class people who have very little time, who have so many stresses, who are under so many pressures, there isn't that much time for symbolism. We have to make it materially connected to their life. And I think that what opportunity we have is that we are in a country where those connections abound, especially in New York City. You have so many opportunities to make clear the ways in which that struggle over there is tied to capital's interest over here.
Actually, I'm pretty sure that's a perfect example of exactly what you're talking about.
Yeah, it's that the message matters more than anything. And when I heard him say that in that clip the first time, of course, the stuff about the IDF and targeting Israel of all countries all the time, it seems strange to me. But that's not actually the strange part for me of that clip. What's really strange is why he thinks that the NYPD has its boot on anybody's neck. Why is that the overriding?
Right?
The NYPD, in 99.9% of cases, is there to protect New Yorkers and people in New York. That's what they do. That's what their job is. They put their lives on the line. They put their safety on the line. They are not there acting as a sort of mythical, authoritarian, tyrannical 1984 style figure. That's not who they are. It's not what they do. And that sort of sleight of hand that he's done there, which is to use the image of the Israeli military as a way to demonize the New York Police Department, is what's really telling. That's the real tell for me, is that his hatred is equal for the NYPD and the IDF. He sees them as he says in his own words, interconnected. And that's what's really disturbing. We can just forget about the IDF stuff. He doesn't like Israel, whatever. It's that he doesn't like the NYPD that is really concerning.
Yeah, and that's actually a very insightful analysis of that. And how sad of a state is the Democrat Party in, or half of our country in, that we are so desensitized to this just virulent anti-Semitism that Zohran Mamdani's position is not just the destruction of the United States, it's the destruction of Israel and of Western civilization. And he quite literally wants to topple market forces, meaning capitalism, the free market in the United States, because the NYPD pension fund dares to invest in Israeli companies. He wants to wreck the lives of New Yorkers. He wants to deprive pensions to New York City police officers who protect New Yorkers because they invest in an Israeli tech company. Like, it's so bad. It's so morally wrong. And yet people are so desensitized to that they're like, yeah, we know that he just hates everybody that's Jewish. He hates everybody that's American. He wants both of our countries to die. But to associate that, with the NYPD as if they're committing police brutality, That's a very interesting point, I think. And by the way, he's posted at least 10 times that he wants to defund the police. Now, all of a sudden, in these final days, he says he doesn't want to. But let's remember that he said more times than he hasn't that he wants to defund the police. Ashley, this was fantastic reporting about Mamdani's background and about the founder of the Students for Justice in Palestine and how their first keynote speaker was Mamdani's father, how Mamdani praised these Holy Land 5 terrorists and how the civil case against those 5 resulted in this offshoot group run by the same guy who started the Students for Justice in Palestine. This is really good reporting. Thank you for following that trail and for helping us untangle it today, because it really does help everyone understand that this person is not just an entitled brat who went to a very expensive college and is, a socialist because he doesn't understand the implications of that. It helps us understand just how deeply orchestrated all of this is and how important it is that we stand against it. So if you want to let people know where they can find your reporting, where they can find you online, I know people are going to be asking.
We are at NPOV, like neutral point of view, npov.substack.com, or I'm on X at Ashley Rindsberg, and we are doing a ton of investigative stuff on digital propaganda, particularly right now on Wikipedia corruption and malfeasance. So check it out. We'd love to have you.
Yeah, highly recommend that you guys do that. We'll post links so you can find it more easily as well. Ashley, thanks for being on the show. I appreciate it.
Thank you, Liz. Good to see you.
You too. All right, guys, I want to pause for a moment and thank you for listening and standing with us. The truth is, Blaze TV only exists because people like you refuse to let fear silence the truth. Darkness never has the final word, not in America and not with us. When you subscribe to Blaze TV, you make sure that the truth has a voice, not just today, but for the next generation as well. By joining with us, you're standing shoulder to shoulder with a community that knows America is still worth fighting for, and boy, do we have to fight for her. You're choosing courage over censorship, truth over fear, and light over darkness, and you are called to join this fight. Please join us, blazetv.com/Liz. You can get $20 off right now for as little as $8 a month. You can be part of shaping the future. Our effort, it's a joint effort. We are on the same team, you and I, and we need your help. blazetv.com/Liz. That's blazetv.com/Liz. All right, guys, make sure you're subscribed to the show on YouTube as well, youtube.com/Liz Wheeler. And on X, you can follow me at x.com/Liz_Wheeler. And of course, we have video on Spotify now. So if you could subscribe over on Spotify as well and leave us a 5-star review, I greatly appreciate it. Thank you for watching. Thank you for listening. I'm Liz Wheeler. This is The Liz Wheeler Show.